Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Feed My Sheep, Earthquake Reports, and more. I'm Terry Rempel, and it's the 11th of March. We're starting today in Alaska, and Alaska has had quite an episode. The data's about a week old, little more, but very important discovery associated with this. Before we begin, all of our programs are dedicated to our Heavenly Father service, and we'll begin with a prayer. Please join us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your continued protection over us and over this program. You are great in all your ways, mighty and wonderful in your love for us in all things. We see the shaking all over the world, all the ways that you are shaking people awake to the truth of your intent that they would all go home, that you want all of your children to go home. We thank you for your great sacrifice, Jesus, so that we would have a way to go home, that we would have a way to go home to a place of love and compassion. We thank you, Holy Spirit, for the understanding that we have of so many things, and that you enhance it with the gifts that you bring from Father, from Jesus. And we give you praise and glory as well. All of this through your holy name, Jesus. Amen. And so we're beginning, not with this image, but we'll come back to this. On the 1st of March, 1st of March, we had 12 mainland Alaska volcanoes that had a major flare-up of activity, and this did not include the Aleutian Islands. This included 2 volcanoes in the panhandle of southeast Alaska. Now, the Aleutian Island volcanoes were not involved. You can see as we go through, there's a fade out of activity that can be seen at the western end of the peninsula in Alaska, out at Shishaldin. Now, if the Aleutian Island volcanoes had been involved, we could point to a solar energy cause. We could include perhaps other volcanoes to the south. But what we had was the whole Aleutian chain or peninsula and the panhandle, and it skipped. The activity didn't include the Aleutian Islands, so we're looking at a different process, and we understand that what we had was the whole of Alaska, minus the Aleutians, shifted as a package in subduction at the same time. That's a pretty big deal. This resulted in 12 stratovolcanoes. Now, stratovolcanoes are built by subduction. This is the Ring of Fire, and that's what you get on the Ring of Fire. 12 stratovolcanoes of mainland Alaska showed a flare-up of seismic activity at the same time. And what we're seeing is cause and effect. The near same time of subduction causes the near same time of seismic stratovolcano flare-up. And so now we're going to show you the evidence. And we're starting with Shishaldin, which is right at the extreme west end of the peninsula, just into the Fox Islands. The change is less pronounced here, but still apparent. So you can see here with this seismogram. Let's see, does it open up? Get a little larger? I think it does.
Yep.
Just going to pause for it. Apparently, it's a slow load today. Bear with me, folks. We can see that it's normal activity up in the top of this seismogram, and then it slowly fades through and increases, and it gets about 3 times larger. So this has a slow increase, and it's a significant increase, but it's a slow fade through from about the top third, 2/3. So the bottom 2/3 show the increase, a slow fade increase. When we move east to Pavlov, by comparison, there's a little heavier activity down at the bottom than at Shishaldin. We're moving east, getting into the peninsula more, but we have that same kind of slow fade in across here. Aniakchak. Now, this is a more active volcano, and it's at aviation code yellow. And I should mention there's currently 4 Alaska volcanoes that are at aviation code yellow warning code, right? And one at orange, and that's up significantly. That's 2 extra yellows than normal. So Aniakchak, there we have it. We do see an increase here, but we see quite a jump. So we see a jump to a light increase in here, about a third of the way in. And then for the last 25% or so of the seismogram, we see a large jump. It's similar, but it's not the same in how the activity progressed. But Aniakchak, being an active volcano, can have a little bit of difference, and we're not concerned. The outcome is that we had a significant jump by the time of the end of the seismogram. Now, the change is more pronounced at Ugashek Pulik than at Shishaldam and Pavlov. So here we have, now this is a smaller volcano and volcanic field that's it's important, but it's less recognized. So we see a jump, we've got a seismogram there, and we see a more significant change and increase in the activity at this site than the others that we were just at. Oh, I should enlarge that quickly for you so you can have a quick look before we move on. Almost like I'm out of practice. We've not been reporting as often. Unlike other channels, we're not reporting daily activity for the most part, unless it's very large. What we're reporting on is tectonic trends, major changes, and this, what we're describing here, is one of these major changes. And we report discoveries as well. So when we're seeing increases and changes that you should be aware of, that's what we're reporting on, not day-to-day volcanic, where the earthquakes might be occurring and such. So this channel has a different approach than most. Now, Martin is the next as we continue east. And so this is the trend that we're showing you here and the outcome. And we're seeing now at Martin that we have this same increase for about half of the seismogram now. The previous one was a little shorter, but much the same time. Trident is next as we continue east towards Anchorage. And we can see we've got about a half full of the seismogram with a major change. So this is all moved at much the same time, or we're seeing a volcanic response, a seismic response at the volcanoes at the same time. So Trident is another volcano that's at aviation flight code yellow. And right beside it is Katmai. So this is Katmai, and this one actually shows more activity most of the time than Trident does. I think they flipped a coin as to which one they were going to put at aviation code yellow, because they're so close to each other that if you put aviation code yellow at one, it covers the other one. So I'm going to guess that's what happened. I don't know for certain. But this is, of the two, I would say this is the more active volcano even than Trident. And we can see the deviation in the baseline above and below points to exactly that thing, that it's more active. So Katmai, very significant increase, more on the last half, but it gets up into the upper, just above the half line as well. So we're not seeing an exact replication, but close. As I said, Katmai is a very active volcano. Now, 2 days after this seismogram, I went up checking AVO webcams at Katmai, and I spotted a mushroom cloud of steam rising hundreds of feet, probably in excess of 800 feet above Katmai. I wasn't able to save the image, unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, which means Esther wasn't home to show me how to do it. So there you go. Iliamna, heading towards Anchorage, continuing east. And the activity comes in a little later, but much the same time. So we're only talking about a few hours difference in the activity that we see at Katmai, or we see at Trident, or we see at Martin, or we see at Ugashak Pulik. I'm probably butchering the pronouncement of that, but anyway. Iliamna, very busy as well. Redoubt. So redoubt is showing the same pattern of activity where it's about the bottom half of the seismogram that has a big jump in activity. And this is a big, long area that we're covering that's moving or responding all at the same time. Is that going to open up or not? It doesn't get a lot larger. I'm tempted to move forward just so you don't have to wait. We'll wait another minute, half a minute, less. Give it 10 seconds. And done. So you'll have to take my word for it if you can't see it well. It doesn't blow up that much larger. And this is Mount Spur. And Mount Spur is just about as active as Redoubt on this seismogram. Now this is Edgecumbe. And Edgecumbe is now coming down south on the panhandle of southeast Alaska. And this is about midway down the panhandle. So this is of great interest that not only the volcanoes were reacting along the northern arc border of the Pacific, but also down the southeast of the Pacific Ocean. We've come around the corner and down a ways. This is describing a major event going on. And at the same time, I didn't get a good image from the Alaska Volcano Observatory seismogram, but I did get a good one from a matching seismogram, actually, from USGS. So this one shows that we had the same activity the same time, about the bottom half of the seismogram for Wrangell. And Wrangell, this is Wrangell Island, not Wrangell Volcano. Wrangell Volcano is quite a bit north. And this isn't Wrangell Island itself. This is a small volcano, an island volcano about 4.5 miles in diameter, rises near 2,000 feet. And it's at pretty much the south end of the panhandle of Alaska, southeast Alaska. So we're seeing activity at the same time at Wrangell. So what are we looking at? What these seismograms are telling us is that about 1,400 miles of Alaska shifted together. And it was a subduction shift, and that puts more crust under the volcanoes, and that caused a seismic flare-up along the whole length of the continental Alaska at almost exactly the same time. And imagine that's 1,400 miles of the continent moving at least along the shoreline at the same time. And what we get, of course, is we get some upward buckling as the land pushes against the Pacific Plate. The continent itself, near the shoreline for the about 80 miles or so, buckles upwards. But the seafloor can buckle downwards, and it can also accordion a little bit. So this allows movement along the shoreline. When you release that, you can drop the land height a little bit, and you can actually raise the seafloor a little bit when you get a shift along the coast. And it has to be a bigger shift than this in order to record it, at least as far as what people would see on the shoreline. But certainly there was shifting all along the shoreline of subduction that was feeding new crust down under the Ring of Fire Alaska volcanoes. Okay, so these are all stratovolcanoes. They're created by subduction, and they're fed by subduction. The only thing that makes them flare up like this as a group is when they're all subducting at the same time, when they all had movement feeding them all a small amount and a similar amount of crust at the same time. So we had a shift of all of Alaska, continental Alaska, at the same time. That's what the seismograms are telling us. But it's more than this. we would expect that's an extreme, and that's a major discovery, and nobody's this is unique. On the 6th of March, Esther and later on. Did I mention the steam plume? Yeah, there was a steam plume from Katmai as well, so that backs up the some of the volcanic findings and the activity of Katmai. On the 6th of March, Esther and I spotted a steam cloud on the east-facing flank of Mount Benson. Now, Mount Benson is a local volcano here in Nanaimo, or near Nanaimo. And it's on the east-facing flank of ridges that follow up the east side of Vancouver Island. So when you're offshore, you can see for many miles up the east, or to the north and to the south along the east face of the island. And that's the perspective that Esther had. And I was a little closer at a different location, but also close to Mount Benson. So she had a wide-angle view that let her see 15 to 20 miles of either side of Mount Benson with this cloud on the east flank. And there was no cloud anywhere else in that 30 to 40 miles, just at Mount Benson. And it wasn't a thin, wispy cloud. This was a thick, heavy, white cloud, and it was rapidly rising. And what she was able to describe from her vantage point is that she could see 3 vents jetting steam upwards. From my vantage point, I could see the steam rapidly rising, but I couldn't see the base. I was too close to see the base of where the cloud was, or the steam was emanating from, the cloud of steam. So this thick white cloud was about 700 feet wide, and it rose about 750 feet from the location where it began. There's a very prominent knoll on Mount Benson, and by locating that knoll and seeing where it was, I was able to go to Google Earth and do some very close approximations of the height. And 750 feet is very close to what it's going to be for what was actually there. We could do close comparisons using landmarks. So we didn't see the onset of this, but we saw it continue for over 30 minutes. So this was a major event. Now, BC doesn't have any well-placed seismograms for tracking volcanic activity that I am aware of or have access to. And as I believe, from what I researched and studied, we've just got a very, very poorly funded seismic system in Canada. And it's very low-quality seismograms. They don't have any saved data except for 2 hours, and it's a compressed system, and it's just not very effective at all. So what we have to use is other systems. Now, we have satellite imagery, we have eyewitness accounts, and one of the ones we can use is windy.com, and this is what we have here. And this is showing the orange and red is showing sulfur drift. And sulfur in this area is going to come from volcanoes. There's volcanoes all through here. This is the BC coastal mountain area. And some of these volcanoes extend well inland as well. So this is a known area that's just loaded with volcanoes. Starting from near Garibaldi to the south and going through a whole raft of them. I showed a bunch of them on a previous program using Google Earth. And there is just a great many here. The coastal mountains are riddled with them. And they continue inland in some areas. They also continue right to the coast in some areas, as they do in other areas of the Cascade Range. Now, if you want to find the ancient volcanic sites, you look for the mineralization, because pretty much all of the mineralization that's laid down west of the Rockies was put there by volcanoes. There are some exceptions, of course, but most of it. So with 1,400 miles of Alaska shifting, heavy BC coastal sulfur emissions, and local steam emissions, there's grounds to add that coastal BC has also been shifting with Alaska. And this northern continental shift seems to stop just north of the Fraser River. That makes the shift of subduction over 2,000 miles. And then we could add the Alaska Panhandle in as well, or the Alaska Aleutian Islands in as well, the Fox and Aleutian Islands. And we already saw a subduction earthquake south of Ferndale on the 20th of December, and we've got another program on California that's covering that. California once again, because there's been some further advances in activity in California. This California is just blowing my mind. It has not slowed down since that subduction 7 in Ferndale. It's actually spreading. The activity is increasing down there. So here we're looking. This is where the active new volcanoes are out on the Aleutian Islands. They're out here, this area. This is Aniakchak over here. This is Trident over here. Not the best picture. Let's see. I could blow that up. That might help. And here we've got Semisopoknoi here at yellow. We've got Great Sitkin here at orange. And one of these is Tanaga. I think it's right hiding underneath here. Aniakchak at yellow is here. Trident is here. And we'll move in a little bit to the next frame. And there's Semisopoknoi at yellow, Great Sitkin over here at orange, and Tanaga is here in the middle. Garreloi is actually right there. We'll get to Garreloi in a minute. So Tanaga was not, it wasn't recognized as being a threat. It's only recently at yellow, and that's Tanaga Island. And this is Takawanga volcano on Tanaga a couple of days ago. And this shows the swarm of earthquakes. The ones in white are, I think, over 2 days, or actually over a week old. The yellow, I think, are 2 days to 7 days old, and then the brown are are 2 days or less old. So you can see this has been going on for a while. And here we see both Takawanga overlapping with Tanaga. This is Tanaga volcano over on the left side. So the left quarter of the screen, or half the screen, I guess, is all related to Tanaga. And we can see that, if this will ever open, we can see that there's a significant increase around Tanaga volcano, which is the older of the two. Takawanga is a younger volcano, Tanaga is the older, and the activity is shifted, so it's not focused around Takawanga, but is actually focused around Tanaga. And in this case, they've got both at aviation flight code yellow. So that's a lot of earthquakes swarming there. Imagine all of these in brown are in the last 2 days. And there's some red ones in there as well. There's one there, one there, one there. So here's how Takawanga looks on a seismogram, as soon as that'll open. My apologies for the delay, but we seem to be having some slow internet issues. Anyway, there's a lot of earthquakes showing there, but keep in mind just how much is there. There's a big swarm coming right at the bottom, but these are all relatively small earthquakes in the not much over the 1.5 range. Almost a duplicate when looking from Tanaga. So these volcanoes are pretty close together, and it takes a very keen eye in comparison, and usually a computer, to figure out which one they're coming from when they're this close together. Now, Semisopoknoi at aviation yellow as well, you can see that the activity is larger. So we have larger activity there, but not as much of it. So here we're looking at Garreloi. When we look at Garreloi, we see that we've actually got larger activity at Garreloi now. And there's a lot of it. There's not as many earthquakes, but the earthquakes are larger. The overall seismicity at Garreloi is larger than at Tanaga or Takawanga. So Garreloi could easily be placed at yellow as well, and that would give us a fifth volcano at yellow, aviation warning code. And as I was showing you, Katmai is busy enough, certainly busier than Trident, and could easily be at aviation code yellow as well. So that would give us 6 if they were competently applied according to seismicity, which is the process that they use. And here we're using seismicity as the scale. We would have 6 at yellow just using the process of seismicity that the Alaska Volcano Observatory System uses. So volcanoes of the Aleutian Islands are also reactivating, and these are all stratovolcanoes that were built by the process of subduction. That's the whole ring of fire. And their reactivation proves accelerating subduction along the North Pacific boundary, and that's now out into the Aleutian Islands as well. We could reasonably add Garreloi and Katmai to the aviation code list at yellow, and that would be the unprecedented 6 at yellow and 1 at orange, showing that we have a very significant increase in seismicity across the whole northern boundary of Alaska. This gets into significant activity at volcanoes that are closer that they're not putting on flight warning levels at, and they're not as busy as Garreloi, and they're not swarming with earthquakes, but they are certainly experiencing an increase in tremor levels, as we showed earlier on this program. So that's a lot of activity, that's a lot of subduction. So we're seeing movement of the whole north end of the continent by reactivation of the volcanoes. It shows up in the seismicity, in the seismic signals that we find at the volcanoes. That's the proof of subduction activity occurring. And so that's what we have. So we've got 2,000 miles plus of North America, everything Canada and Alaska along the shoreline, movement along the shoreline of subduction. And that's a major, major finding. So that's something to be aware of. And this fits into precursor activity for the Great Cascadia. And that's why this is so important. This is precursor activity. The only thing that restrains the Cascadia is friction. And when we're seeing this kind of movement, we're seeing that friction is being reduced. Force is overcoming friction, and we're getting movement underway. Certainly it can lock up again, but we're overdue significantly for the next Cascadia, and we're seeing quite an increase in earthquake activity. In our next program, we're going back to California, and we're going to show you how the south end is also showing more precursor activity to the Cascadia through California as well. We've got a widespread increase in activity through the Sierra Nevadas that we're going to be talking about, and a new volcano being discovered down there, and a second as a maybe. So that's 3 new volcanic discoveries in the last I think 3 months. Mount Diablo, and then south of there by 25 miles, and then north we've got a new one up near Happy Camp. So we'll get into that in the next program, and we'll see you then. In the meantime, consider God and His blessings and the need for protection. There are a great many things shaking in the world today. The whole banking system is shaking, with a couple of bank collapses recently. Financial systems are certainly being threatened, but I think what we're seeing as much as anything is we're seeing the spiritual battle that's going on, and the forces of evil is shaking the world in many ways. And we're seeing what is going on in the heavens and behind the scenes is being manifested in the physical. And this fits into end times prophecies as well, that there will be great shakings of many kinds. The horses that ride and the famines, the pestilence, and everything that they bring. Understanding those prophecies is pretty important. And it gives us a picture into what our timeline is and what's going to be going on. We're not living in fear. We are living with the joy of the Lord, being prepared in all ways. And we get peace that passes understanding by standing under the wings of our Father and knowing our blessings. All right, so may you be blessed as well. And we'll see you next time on Feed My Sheep, Earthquake Reports, and more. Bye for now.